Started. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. To bring together our city leadership team to update the public on our unprecedented storm and flooding that occurred and our storm recovery efforts. We're here at Lincoln High School. This is an evacuation center operated by the Red Cross that is serving local residents who have been tragically displaced as a result of yesterday's storm. I want to start at the outset. I thank the Red Cross for doing the exceptional work that they do. I know this is just the start of a process, but Sean from their team is here today. Sean, thank you to you and all your volunteers for what you got going on. Also with me this afternoon is Eric Dargan, our city's Chief Operating Officer, Chris Heiser, who's the Executive Director of our Office of Emergency Services, Chris McFadden, our Deputy Chief Operating Officer, Chief Colin Stoll of our Fire Rescue Department. And as you see, there are other city executives who are here. Our Police Chief, David Nislight, Sarah Jarman, our Director of Homelessness Strategies and Solutions, Alia Curry, another one of our Deputy Chief Operating Officers, Rania Amon, who is the leader of our Engineering Capital Projects team, Bethany Bezak, our Transportation Director, and Todd Snyder, our Stormwater Director. So a lot of resources here to answer any questions that y'all may have. As you all know, yesterday's had a significant rainfall event that occurred in our city that caused flash flooding, damaging homes and businesses. I want to acknowledge that this was particularly the case in the southeastern communities of the city of San Diego, specifically Southcrest, Mountain View, Encanto, Logan Heights, and San Ysidro. I was out in Southcrest this morning connecting with residents and coordinating our city's recovery efforts with those members of the community as well as our city crews. What I can tell you and what I saw, the damage and the impact was absolutely devastating. In fact, it's heartbreaking. I saw homes that were destroyed by floodwaters that reached the ceilings in some cases. I saw cars that had been picked up and moved down the street, floated away from where they had been parked, got swamped with water and with mud. I saw the entire lives change in just a few minutes. And I want to let folks know that my heart is with them, and I ask San Diegans to hold every one of your neighbors in your hearts who are having to deal with yesterday's events. I also want to be clear that the city of San Diego is doing and will continue to do everything it can to help. As you know, yesterday I declared a state of local emergency given the severity of that rainfall and the flash flooding that occurred. Last night, I'm pleased that the county of San Diego followed suit, and I'm very pleased this afternoon to tell you that just a few hours ago, Governor Gavin Newsom declared a state of emergency for the counties of San Diego and Ventura. I want to thank our governor, as well as our state legislative delegation, leaders like Senate President Pro Tem Tony Atkins, as well as Assembly Member Chris Ward, for calling early this morning and asking what they can do to help, and then quickly delivering. I appreciate them making this happen. These declarations are important. They enable us to respond more quickly, to bypass bureaucracy, provide access to more resources to help our communities recover, and the ability to seek reimbursement, both for residents and for businesses. Now, certainly, nobody anticipated the severity of this storm. We knew that it was going to rain, and our city storm patrol crews were out last week and throughout the weekend doing their usual storm preparations, things like cleaning out storm drains. But the amount of water that we saw yesterday would have overwhelmed any city drainage system. However, this dumping of rainwater is unprecedented in most San Diegans' lifetimes. None of us alive have seen anything quite like this. To put this into perspective, the last storm of this severity was in the 1930s, and there have been fewer than 5 storms this severe in the city's recorded history. Today, we are turning our efforts into how the city will clean up and help residents and businesses deal with the damage that they've experienced. I want to encourage everyone who has experienced storm damage to fill out the County of San Diego survey. They'll help us to quantify the regional impacts in order to help our region qualify for relief efforts. With that said, I want to turn the podium over to our Chief Operating Officer to provide more details on the city's efforts, our COO, Eric Dargan. Mr. Dargan?
Appreciate it. Good afternoon. I will say that this event that happened yesterday was unprecedented, more than anything we've ever seen. According to the National Weather Service, rainfall in San Diego County yesterday hit record levels. We're talking about 2.73 inches of rain at the San Diego International Airport weather station. Yesterday was the 4th wettest day on record in the city of San Diego. That's within a 24-hour period, and that's since 1850. What's more significant, we broke the National Weather, we talked to the National Weather Service about this. The rate at which the rainfall happened, we saw 3/4 of an inch of rain to 1 inch of rain per hour. That's an intense rate of rainfall in an urban setting. The way I explain this to my wife, real simple, is the difference between turning on the faucet to the tub and the faucet to the shower. The faucet to the tub, it fills up very quickly. The faucet to the shower, water flows smoothly over time. The system just could not handle that amount of rain. During Tropical Cyclone Hillary, for example, the rain was spread out over 20 hours. I've been here for a year and 3 months, coming from Houston, Texas. I thought I was getting away from hurricanes. I thought I was getting away from flash floods, but apparently that's not the case. But the reality is, the good part, the sun is shining today, and the water has receded. It could be worse. Water could be standing for another week, and houses could still be flooded. But we're taking the good with the bad, and we're responding as quickly as we possibly can. I want to thank those people who have already stood up to the plate to make things happen. To our police department and our fire rescue department, thank you. You did a great job of making sure that we conducted life rescues, swift water rescues, and the public is very much appreciated. I also like to thank our Parks and Rec department, along with our Homeless Strategies department and the General Services department. All these departments mobilized quickly, not only to assist citizens, but to help out with the Alpha Project Shelter and our 20th and B safe sleeping site, getting them reset up so that they could be safe. We also saw flooding in our city facilities. We had flooding in the downtown library where our parking lot was flooded, as well as our police station, who also received water. But at the end of the day, everything is back and open and operational today. We're here to serve, and we will continue to do so. So thank you very much for your patience as we seek to put this city back into great operation condition. But next up, I'd like to introduce Chris Heiser, our Director of the City Office of Emergency Services, to speak more about the city emergency response. Chris.
Thank you, Eric. So my day started just like everybody else's. Difference is I look at the weather and start to make decisions. So when I got a call that the homeless shelter at 16th and Newton was flooded, thought it might have just been an isolated event and drove down there. I'm going to say the word again, but try and really understand the significance. One, unprecedented does not capture this event. Number two, the impact to the city could have been overwhelming had the city not been prepared. So don't confuse unprecedented event with the city not being prepared for it. The biggest thing was to increase the support to the public in an attempt to manage this event. Police, fire, the infrastructure, stormwater, all were in place and simply responded per their protocols and added more resources to manage this event. So unprecedented is one takeaway, preparedness is the other. We activated the city EOC to a level 2 to help coordinate efforts from among the city departments. We've reached out and have been in close communication with the County of San Diego to coordinate our efforts and ensure that the public is receiving the highest level of service possible. So today, what we're focused on is the recovery efforts, reaching out to the public. As was mentioned, the survey is critical in continuing to determine the extent and scope of damage throughout the city. And number two, to ensure that we can qualify for state and federal funds to support our community. Part of the and most significant impact was to the homeless population. And this was truly an impressive move to take 363 individuals during the height of the storm, with flooding impacting every avenue in and out of downtown, and moving them to a safe shelter at Balboa Activity Center. And this is part of the close coordination we have with Park and Rec to ensure that we have adequate housing for that population. The Emergency Operations Center will continue to remain open to provide support to the departments and the public. We have coordinated with 211. So if a member of the community, if you have a question, call 211 and they can help facilitate and direct you where to go. If you need food, if you need transportation, if you're unsure, call 211. They are designed, and we've reached out in coordination with the county for them to provide information. Thank you. I'll be followed by Chris McFadden, Deputy Chief Operating Officer.
Thank you, Chief Heiser. I'd like to touch a little bit on the infrastructure impacts that we realized over the past 48 hours. And again, you've heard about the storm, and this is what we would classify in stormwater as a 1,000-year storm. That means it's about a 1% chance normally of happening if you look at history. What's clear now is what rain patterns were before is not what they are today, and they're not what they are moving forward. And it's something we need to plan for, and something indeed we are. As you know, South Crest, Encanto, and Choice Creek are the hardest hit areas. I was there this morning, as was the mayor, to really view not just the infrastructure impacts, but the impacts to the people who've lived there for years. I know one gentleman has lived there for over 50 years and has said he's never seen this. Again, this is a massive amount of water. I want to make sure that you let everybody know that every day, it's not just when storms are approaching, but city employees, the men and women, are out there every day to prepare all our storm drain channels, do inspections regularly of all the storm drains and all of the hardened structures, including our pump stations too. To give you an idea, we have 15 pump stations throughout the city. 2 of those actually lost electrical power over the storm, but we had staff managing them on site to mitigate as much flooding as possible. Right now, all but 2 of our pump stations are online, and we expect the remaining 2 to be online by the end of the day. Storm preparation. This is something we begin well in advance of the storm, where we leverage hundreds of our public works employees to actually stop their regular work and go into what we call storm patrol mode, where they know where these critical drain structures are, do an additional inspection before the storm is coming to ensure we are as ready as possible. This is over 300 staff in the Transportation Stormwater Department alone. This week, as mentioned, we started working on this heightened level just last Thursday. This includes any drain, any stormwater structure, as well as coordinating with the other departments with active construction, both private and public, going on throughout the city. I want to thank the dedicated men and women of these departments, without which we would have really realized significantly more damage. As of last night, we fielded more than 400 calls, with hundreds more coming in today. Crews are in the field addressing priority cleanup areas, particularly where channels have breached, which we've seen in this area. Crews are focusing first on those extreme hazards and getting people back to normal as quickly as possible. And we are assessing cleanup needs and will continue to work out through the week. Cleanups are based primarily on making sure that roadways are first eliminated any hazards to public safety. That is always our priority. Also, I want to let this community know that there are plans already in place. You're going to see some actually improvements in South Crest Park. These are capital improvements that will really improve not just stormwater, but also the water quality. We're also pleased to provide information that we have secured over $700 million of federal funding. A lot of that is going into stormwater improvements, and indeed in Beta Street, in this very neighborhood, desperately needed. And we've also requested FEMA for a grant to identify $24 million so we actually get this project constructed. With that, I want to thank all the men and women of the city who really make this place a greater and safer place to live, and I'll turn it over to Chief Stoll.
Well, thank you, Chris, and thank you all for being out here today. As Fire Chief, I would be remiss if I didn't start my comments off with publicly recognizing the firefighters, the lifeguards, and the police officers who performed some exceptional work yesterday. We should all be very proud of the public safety services that we provide and protect our communities with. We literally saw over 100 rescues in the South Crest neighborhood alone, rescuing hundreds of people on top of roofs, inside cars, on top of their cars. Over 30 animals were also rescued during that time. And then at that same time, just in the South, while the South Crest community was experiencing that, we had over 50 active rescues going on throughout the rest of the city with our lifeguards and firefighters and police officers. To provide you some perspective on the call volume that we saw, our dispatch center received almost 900 calls just yesterday for calls for service, and we responded to over 903 incidents throughout the city of San Diego and our neighboring cities. And we are the secondary public safety answering point. So as the police department is our primary PSAP, you can imagine how inundated and impacted they were as well. To offer you a comparison of that, last Monday at the same time frame, we only had 583 phone calls to our dispatch center. So we saw almost a 45% increase in call volume just to our dispatch center, and we saw 110% of the calls that we normally see on a Monday just yesterday. That caused it to be so inundated at our dispatch center that not only were we opening up the DOC in conjunction with the city with our emergency operations center, but we were also initiating what we call we were commanding it from the battalion level there. And so as we were doing area command, as we call it, we had to push these calls out to those local geographic zones because we could not handle it on a citywide basis. Our lifeguards reported over 50 rescues, not only along the San Diego riverbank, but in the flood channels, as well as on top of cars and standing water and in moving water in a lot of those streets that were just inundated. Luckily, we saw very few injuries right here in the Southcrest neighborhood, and fortunately we saw no fatalities for a storm this size. That is simply just remarkable. And so again, this was all due to the coordination of all of our public safety agencies. We could not have done it without our partners with the police department, lifeguards, all of the other departments in the city to be able to provide that. We called off-duty personnel back to help us staff stations, to staff those incident command areas that we needed help at. And so it really was all hands on deck yesterday to be able to mitigate those efforts. I'm happy to say that we are back to normal operations today, and of course we'll be available to answer any questions later on. And now I'll turn it back over to Mayor Todd, Gloria.
Chief, thank you, and thank you to all of our city team who's here to provide that update. Thank you all for helping to provide that information to the general public. Happy to take questions from members of the media in just a moment, but I'll just conclude by saying that I'm heartbroken by the losses that I saw this morning, the calls and the social media posts that I see. This is very real. I've realized for the vast majority of San Diegans, they were mildly inconvenienced yesterday in the rain. What we have is a large number of San Diegans who are going to be in recovery mode for not a couple of hours or a couple of days, but probably measured in weeks or months. And I ask again for our city to come together to support our fellow neighbors who've been impacted, who may end up losing their homes over this very sad situation. Want to repeat that the city has been doing, and will continue to do everything it possibly can to leverage every possible local, state, and federal resource to help those in need. This is not over and done today. This is going to be an ongoing concern. I look forward to continuing this dialogue with members of the media as well as the public to make sure the information gets out, folks understand what the response is, what the state of play is, and we'll continue to work until we get this entire situation resolved. But I cannot express enough appreciation and gratitude to the city team that came together, all these directors explaining what happened. Chief Stoll was exactly spot on. An unprecedented event of this nature with no loss of life is a miracle, but it was made possible because of the diligence of a lot of public servants who stepped into the breach and a lot of neighbors who came together to support one another. We need that same kind of can-do spirit over the next number of weeks and months in order to make sure that everyone who's been impacted are able to survive this and hopefully come out of this in a better place. So with that, comments, questions that we have from folks? Yes. Yeah. I think I answered that question. The answer is yes, and it's going to take weeks, months, right? But let me ask if maybe Chief Heiser or someone else can maybe speak more to the FEMA component of it. Chief, I don't know if you heard the declaration, when that gets federal response, and when they may expect more news on that front.
So in regards to the declarations, San Diego City was the first to declare an emergency. We were followed last night by San Diego County. In turn, the state of California, about noon today, the governor issued that declaration. That starts a process of for reimbursement of what's allowable for the city's infrastructure. We're at a little over initial assessment, $6 to $7 million of damage to what I'll say is the city infrastructure. That's buildings, equipment, those types of things. Secondary to that is support for the community, and that's the small business loan. And Small Business Association comes out under FEMA and will offer low interest loans. We're in the process, and that's why they emphasized filling out the survey so that we can determine, do we have enough of an impact to qualify for that process, and then with the county and FEMA will provide assistance in moving that through. And that's for small business loans to both the businesses and the public at a low interest rate. If, and I say if, this is larger and covers adds Ventura, and at some point the state reaches out to FEMA, then there may be additional FEMA grants available, but that's a separate process. So right now, for clarity, we're in the gathering information, documenting the level of impact, encouraging everyone, photograph the damage, take pictures, document. FEMA, the state, everyone expects documentation to validate what's occurred. So we're in a process right now. I'm not implying that we have the ability to provide that, but as the mayor said, the mayor along with his staff, OES, at both the county and our level is pursuing every avenue for funding to support the community. Yeah.
Sure. So the question was, given the impacts to our unsheltered population, are there any long-term plans for relocating folks from 20th and B and the 16th and Newton sites? And the answer to both those questions is yes. That was before the storm event. As you may know, the 20th and B site is on city parkland, and so we have essentially a very time-limited nature there. We can't be there long-term because it's not a recreational use on parkland. We've known that. That's why we've been working towards more midterm solutions like H barracks and more long-term solutions like the Old Central Library. This is a part of our existing comprehensive shelter strategy that was published and given to the council and the public last summer. And so this is unrelated to the storm event, but obviously illustrates why we want to move on. 16th and Newton is also time limited from the perspective that we know that there's adjacent development of very much needed low and middle income housing that's slated to go right next to that particular site. As that developer works through their process to pull permits, we know that we're going to need to relocate 16th and Newton. Again, we've been making preparations for that for quite some time, and that's why when I made the commitment in our State of the City address about 2 weeks ago, then the next year we'll be able to add another 1,000 or so beds to our inventory net, not gross, net. What we're referring to is the relocation of these temporary facilities as well as the addition of new facilities to make sure that we're continuing to grow our shelter capacity for the unsheltered in our community. And I don't know, Sarah Jarman, anything you want to add to that? She's good. I learned everything I know from her, so that's fine. Yeah, we'll work our way around. Yes. Yes, sir. Well, we had information from the National Weather Service. What we were told was to predict a certain amount of rain over a certain period of time. We got a lot more rain than that in a much shorter amount of time. That's why we're dealing with this situation. Everyone knew, you probably saw on your own phone, you knew it was going to rain Monday. We were aware of that. But the concentrated amount of water in that very limited amount of time, and I would argue also in a very limited geographic area. You know, areas like Mission Valley that are known to flood, we certainly had issues there, but not like what we've had down here in the southeastern community. Did we have that information? No, we did not have that information. We're going to need to talk to the National Weather Service about why what we forecasted and what ended up happening are two different things. But right now we're focused on the recovery efforts and trying to address the very real needs of people on places like Beta Street and elsewhere nearby here. We need to take care of those folks as we look at the forecast and hope for better. One thing I know, last week I was at the U.S. Conference of Mayors annual winter meeting in Washington, D.C. Every mayor's talking about how they're dealing more frequently with extraordinary weather events that they've never seen before or happening with a level of ferocity and frequency that is not anticipated. This is called climate change. It is real, it is happening, and we experienced it yesterday in San Diego, and I fear this will not be the last time we deal with it. So on a go-forward basis, those forecasts need to get better, and our anticipation around storm patrol, as you heard Chris McFadden talk about, we're probably going to have to modify that as well. Working our way around Kelly, and then we'll get to, oh, it's 2 Channel 8s. I'll let you fight it out.
Todd Snyder talk about the maintenance of the flood control channels in this general area?
Sure, and Kelly, don't worry, I'll get you too. Todd, where's, there we go, here he is. You can't miss him.
Yeah.
I understand that this maintenance of these flood control channels were part of the 2015-16 mitigation plan, and that construction and bidding was supposed to take place last year, and improvements were supposed to take place last year. What's the history? Why does it take so long to get these flood channels cleared?
Yeah, so two things really have to line up in order for us to do a major maintenance of a flood control channel. Number one, we have to have the funding for it, and number two, we have to secure permits and mitigation from resource agencies. So two things have to line up in order for us to maintain a flood control channel. We have to have the funding for it, and we have to secure environmental permits from the resource agencies, Fish and Wildlife agencies, Army Corps of Engineers, etc. That is a years-long process, and at this point, the city has an inventory of about 200 different channel segments across the city, and we're currently funded to do about major maintenance on about 4 of those channels per year. And so we prioritize those channels and maintain the ones that we can, but a lot of things have to align in order for that to happen, including all of the environmental permits that we need to secure. That is a years-long process of negotiations with resource agencies to line all that up.
Were these channels supposed to be maintained at the end of last year? Was the work supposed to begin at the end of last year?
I'm not sure which channels you're referring to specifically.
The channels in the Mountain View area, the South Chillis Creek channels that go through Mountain View and then
Yeah.
down into Southwest.
What I can tell you is we have not called off any planned maintenance of channels. The channels that were supposed to be maintained over the last several years have been the channels that have been maintained. So we have not canceled channel maintenance for any channels that I'm aware of. It's certainly something we can look into if there's specific reports on it, but I'm not aware of any channel maintenance that's been canceled at this point.
What do you mean when you say mitigation? What does that mean?
So a lot of native vegetation tends to grow up into our flood control channels, even our concrete channels, right? So that native mitigation supports habitat and wildlife. The environmental agencies require us, when we remove vegetation from our channels, we have to mitigate or purchase land or put that native vegetation back somewhere off-site in a different location. And so that requires dollars and time and permits to be able to find that property, to do the construction work to put that native mitigation back. So we're mitigating for impacts within the channel, somewhere off-site from the channel.
1979, southeastern flooding. In 1979, we have residents, Black and Latino here, and they should talk to you because it's very important that they understand why in 2024 there's another flood in the same channel that flooded in 1979. This is an infrastructure issue. It's an infrastructure issue. We are glad we're in a state of emergency. We hope it helps, but January 31st, there's more water coming. There's more rain coming. If we can't handle one day, how we gonna handle 4 to 5?
What, for the residents who are here, yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I'm right here, baby. So here's the thing. We're gonna answer these questions because we want everyone to get this information. These folks are going to stay, and we're gonna have a conversation. Okay. Oh, yeah. I'm. Well, so, but we have the shelter here. We have stuff, and I've already said, let me do my job of doing this part, and then I want to do my more important job, which is talking to you. Is that okay? So can you stay put right there, and then we'll chat? Cool? Yes, ma'am. I was out there this morning, ma'am. I was out there this morning.
I can't even get around a car.
So can just please don't go anywhere. We will have a conversation, okay? Kelly, I promised you next. Yeah. So here's what needs to be repeated. The amount of water that we received yesterday, there is not a drainage system that would have been able to accommodate all of that. What happened yesterday was extraordinary. What we have down there, I do believe, needs to be improved. There's no question about that. As you heard from Todd a moment ago, the investments to change that are extremely expensive and very time intensive. We have advocated at the federal level to do things like get a federal loan for $700 million to do projects like these across the city. It's not just Mountain View, it's all over the city where we have this problem. It is fundamentally true that our stormwater system is not resourced correctly, and that's a long-term thing that we have to probably talk to the voters about, and we can have that conversation. But the bottom line is this: we do provide a level of maintenance. I would always like to do more, but no matter what we would have done with our existing resources, with more resources, what happened yesterday would have overwhelmed that system. We'd be exactly where we are now. So your question was, what would you say to people who are impacted? My plea to them is that they step forward and they file claims, that they report to the county so that we can enumerate that information, share it with our federal partners, and hopefully bring down more resources to help them. And then, of course, to file claims with their insurance company and other responsible parties so that we can make sure that they get the money and the resources they need to get their lives back together. Right now, there is a lot of work to be done on the immediate response, but this is, again, as I've said, and I'll repeat for I think a third time, this is not going to be done by your 5 o'clock newscast tonight. It's not going to be done by the one tomorrow either. This is going to take weeks and months to repair, and I hope all of you will be prepared to tell that story over the next number of months. I'm working this way. Yeah. Chris, you want to talk that?
Sure. So the pump station failures that we had, those are most in the coastal communities, and those have been addressed, and we mitigate that on site. And something to mention too, is the $700 million that we've secured from the federal government, part of that is to do a permanent improvement to this area. Maintenance is not enough. That will never change the system until we actually have a capital improvement project. And that's actually what we have in design now, and seeking that FEMA funding, that $24 million of FEMA funding. That's what needs to happen in order for us to once and for all make the improvements that are so desperately needed here. Yes, they did. Yes.
What's that? Yeah. The last question I saw a hand. Well, I'm sorry. I believe this. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, I know the blame is fun, right? But we have a city that has grown. We're the 8th largest city in the country, and we need to invest in our infrastructure. Our roads, our sidewalks, those get a lot of attention. Stormwater and drainage doesn't always rain here a whole lot. This is a part of why this is traumatic, is this is not a part of our common experience in San Diego. But as I've already mentioned, with a changing climate, I believe that it will. When we competed successfully for that massive federal investment, it's to go to support, is it 16 projects or was 16 projects? I'm sorry? 50 projects. And actually, maybe you can speak more to what we're doing with those funds. But the point is we're in receipt of those funds. But as Todd has already mentioned, it is not as easy as to say, go do that. We have regulators, we have interest groups, we have other folks that will follow a process that makes this take longer. Now, if you'd like to have a conversation or perhaps some advocacy about how we remove those barriers so we can do this work faster, I'm all in. But under the current state of play, this project is nothing that, again, that's going to be completed in one episode of your show. It's going to take multiple years to do this, and I need the public's continued persistence on this issue to actually get the job done. And don't worry, I will get you, because I know he jumped the queue to ask twice, but you can take that with him, okay? Todd, will you give some more information on those projects?
Yeah, thank you. So the $733 million federal loan through the WIFIA program, we're in year one of a 5-year, we're just concluding year one of a 5-year plan for that. So at this stage, really where we're at, so we've gotten US EPA, who's the funder, to approve our list of projects. There's about 50 projects that are on tap for those funds. They range everywhere from replacing deteriorated metal pipe, storm drain pipe that's under our roads, to upgrading some of our pump stations, to doing stream restoration, to increase the capacity on some of the channels to prevent the impacts like you saw today. So a variety of projects. We have about 4 additional years to construct those projects, and so will be working through the engineering design, the environmental permitting, and the construction projects at different schedules for different projects because there are various levels of complexity, but really targeting to get all those projects completed within the next 4 to 5 years.
Okay. I'm gonna have to give you the last question, okay?
You've said multiple times that we should be preparing for this to happen again. We're only like halfway through the season.
Yeah.
So, right, so what would you say to these people about when this happens, possibly in the immediate future? We know that some of the residents here have just asked for mattresses and junk to be removed from
Right.
to make less of a chance that it will overflow when an unprecedented event like this happens.
So we will do an after action on this particular incident and learn and try and improve our response. As you've heard from my team, we do storm patrol, right? And that doesn't sound particularly illustrative. So let me tell you more. That means that we get informed by the National Weather Service that something is coming. We position assets in place in advance to try and address them, and then we do our very best to mitigate. Generally, we're very successful in those situations. In this particular case, the amount of rain and the amount of time it came down really made that effort, the success of that effort diminished, right? What we do going forward, well, we learn from this lesson. We do our best to try and improve upon it. We can hope that we don't have an extraordinary amount of rainfall like this again, and I suspect that's probably going to be fairly rare. God willing, it'll be rare, but we can always do better, and we try to do better. But the maintenance of these facilities are something that is important. We have performed some of that. I live near one, and I've seen that work get performed, but we have to do more, and we'll continue to keep you all posted on this. Again, this is not the last time we're going to come together for this issue. I'm going to need your continued assistance in getting information out to the general public about what they need to know, including the hundreds of families that are directly impacted, like some of these folks here. But I appreciate you helping me get this message out, and we'll continue to provide updates as appropriate. Thank you again for meeting me out here at Lincoln High, and thank you again to our city team for showing up. I'm sure many of them will be available to you all for one-on-ones if you need those. Thank you all very much.